What is it about the third film in a trilogy? Yes, there are certainly examples of great threequels, like The Last Crusade, Before Midnight, Toy Story 3, and Return of the King, but more often than not, it seems that filmmakers don't quite know how to extend their story far beyond its original concept, or to wrap up the story in an organic and satisfying way. Think Alien 3, Jaws 3, The Godfather Part 3, Spider-Man 3, and Return of the Jedi. Look, I'm actually a fan of most of those films, but it is clear that they aren't perfect, and the majority of critics and audiences feel lukewarm towards them, or worse. One that generally shares that assessment is Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. All throughout my life, when this film would come up in conversation, many would often remark that they had only seen the start and never actually watched it all the way through. And the more that I heard this, the more I realized my story was much the same, which is funny because I've seen the first two Mad Max films countless times. So considering that we are getting a new Mad Max film this year in Furiosa, I finally sat down to watch Thunderdome from start to end to see if it really does deserve its reputation, or might it actually be an overlooked gem. Right out of the gate, there seems to be a different tone just based on the music choice alone. The first film opened with this really great foreboding piece of music that perfectly sets the tone for the world. The second film has a similar style of music. In Thunderdome, rather than dark and intense swelling music, we hear a song by Tina Turner. She of course plays a character in this film, and she is billed second only to Mel Gibson himself, and it honestly feels like a gimmick having her sing over the opening titles. The song awkwardly transitions into sweeping shots of the desert, and then the film immediately begins to actually feel like a Mad Max film. I bet if you were to place the music from the original film over these titles, it would really set the right mood and would work a lot better. To be honest, music aside, this film doesn't really set the same mood as its predecessors at any point, because it isn't rated R. It's rated M, or PG-13 if you're American. Whoever decided to rate this PG-13 was a bit mad themselves. Now, the first two films were more brutal in themes than visuals, so you might think it really doesn't matter all that much, but as the film goes on, it rears its head as being one of the most glaring issues with the film. A lack of blood, a lack of death. I think maybe 2 no-name characters die in this, and it's arguably off-screen. My memory fails me on it, which says something. Max's iconic car, the Interceptor, isn't even in the film, and we don't get any car chases. We get one at the end with a train. It's staged relatively well, but it feels obligatory and low in stakes, and Max is a passenger. The concept of the Thunderdome is actually really cool, and the way that Max has to make his way through the seedy town to get to the next place is an interesting expansion of his plight and skill set. In fact, the world building altogether is very intriguing here. I won't spoil the ending if you haven't seen it, but the way it expands the lore is great, which makes the journey all that more of a shame. Where the film drags is when Max actually goes beyond Thunderdome, and he ends up being a sort of godlike figure, reluctantly rescuing this tribe of mostly children who want to escape their post-apocalyptic lot. It is true that in all the Mad Max sequels, Max finds himself helping a group of people in need. This is an important part of his character because it keeps the family man and police officer sides of him alive. However, this felt very Return of the Jedi, Luke, Han, Leia, C-3PO with the Ewoks. It's a nice bit of world building, I guess, but it feels very cutesy and childish, which may sometimes work in Star Wars, but it's not what I want from Mad Max. Tina Turner's character is probably the highlight of the film, to be honest. She gives a cool performance, but disappears for most of the second act. They try to create some kind of plight connection between her and Max, but they don't really sell you on it. Bruce Spence returns from the Road Warrior, but apparently he's playing a different character. I don't know. Max doesn't really recognize him. It's kind of confusing, actually. I don't understand the choice. I think the story is interesting in concept, but there isn't enough excitement injected throughout. I think we should have seen some more brutality with the Thunderdome, some really violent stuff, and maybe Max should have been trapped in the town a bit longer, forced to fight more. This would have given him more time to build a rapport with Tina Turner's character. It's funny because it also feels like Return of the Jedi in that its first act is separated from its second and third. You know, like the Jabba's palace sequence, it's like a whole 30 minutes dedicated to rescuing Han Solo at the start of the movie, and then the actual story happens afterwards. I'm all for going for something different, so I wouldn't normally argue that the lack of car chases was an issue. You've got to change it up eventually, but they didn't really bring anything new in that could supplement the action and stakes of the car chases from the first two films. It doesn't feel like there are stakes in this film, really, and maybe the big reason for that is that there are no villains, no one out to get Max, and no one that he is out to get. Sure, everyone is generally out to get each other in this world for their own gain, but I'm talking like a real antagonistic figure. Someone that lacks the morals of Max, someone who, unlike Max, will cause suffering and step on others to make their way. Tina Turner is not the antagonist. No one is. Despite being a huge Mad Max fan that loves all the other films, including the new Furiosa, I can't see myself returning to this film because it just feels so tame compared to the other installments. Once Max cuts his hair, I do think that he probably looks cooler here than any other film in the series. He'd make for a really good collector's statue or something. But I think the reason this film is so iconic is just because of, well, Tina Turner. But mainly because of the hype built around it following The Road Warrior. That second film was so successful and well received that I think they wanted to expand their audience by making it PG-13. But the film suffers because it never feels like it goes far enough with its tone and visuals. It does feel like the PG-13 was a pre-production decision. They didn't just happen to make a tamer film. Whether it was the studio or not, they planned this from the beginning. I haven't done much research, but I would bet money that it was studio meddling. The other films feel dark and intense under the surface, like anything shocking could happen at any moment. George Miller's producing partner on the first two films, Byron Kennedy, did pass away before they shot this film, so it is highly likely that that affected George Miller's motivation with this film, because it does have a very flat tone to it. It doesn't feel very energetic like the other films. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is a structurally sound film. It works as a full piece. It is watchable, but that's it really, watchable. Mad Max should be enthralling, riveting, intense. It's none of these things. Go watch the other four. Furiosa deserves your money. I love showing people overlooked films. I love championing the misunderstood. I'd love to be able to say that you've been sleeping on Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and I'm sure some people like it a lot, and that's fine, but for me, it's pretty average and a far cry from what attracted me to this series in the first place.